Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome to our fourth Young Adult podcast here at Ep.4 Church. And hey, we plan to have regular conversations on hot topics and questions to help you in these defining and challenging stages of your life. And all being well, we'll be able to bring some biblical wisdom and relevance into your world to help equip you to thrive. You're listening to Nathan and Megan Rutledge, your Young Adult pastors. Megan, how are you doing?
I'm good. Hey, we are in part two of a two-series almost episodes for our podcast. Last podcast, we looked at mistakes that we make, and we looked at them all in relationships. So if you haven't checked it out after this, you need to go and check it out. But this is part two. We're going to continue that theme of mistakes. We're going to continue that theme of, hey, we're going to expose ourselves. We're going to put ourselves out there. Yeah. We're going to let you know some mistakes that me and Nathan have made through these stages of life. But today, we're not going to focus on relationships. We're going to move towards different life stages. We're kind of going to change direction of a few different topics. Some of them are a bit random, but hey, they're all mistakes we've made, because we believe that, you know, when you make a mistake, yes, there is a consequence, and we're going to be discussing them, but there is a lesson to be learned. So we want to share with you guys. So maybe, you know, you can learn from some of our mistakes. But let's start with university, you know, education, university, that years, maybe 18 to 22, them kind of years. Nathan, what was maybe a mistake you made when it comes to that?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, and it's a mistake that I definitely made in my university days was I took for granted my whole education. And this was perhaps right before I started university, where it didn't really have maybe someone in my ear saying, hey, if you want to get to this goal, then you need to consider what options are available in university. So I didn't really put too much thought into what course I was going to do. I didn't really set myself up well in my A levels to go, right, if you want to get to this end goal of doing this type of career, you need to have, you know, 1, 2, 3.
You ended up studying outdoor, what was it?
I ended up studying, really funny actually, outdoor education.
Okay, I don't know anyone who's ever done that at university apart from you.
It was basically like a course where you just rock climbed, kayaked.
Sounds fun though.
Hiked. It was heaps fun. It was like the best 2 years ever. And then they just throw in environmental science to make it sound like, you know, university.
Like this is actually meant to be a university degree.
So that was, I guess, what I did, where I just did a bit of fun. I wanted to try and follow up on that type of thing, but didn't really take it too serious. I sort of, took my education for granted almost. It's a privilege, you know, in this day and age, education is a privilege. So I think, look, from that mistake, the consequence that I sort of was faced with was I then went into a career that I didn't really want to be in. Yeah. I went down the whole sort of sales direction.
Which has nothing to do with outdoor education.
Yeah, nothing at all. But I guess it was an entry-level job at the time. And I guess, you know, through time, I'm actually still doing sales, a little bit of marketing now. I'm more interested in marketing. But yeah, I guess for me, it wasn't what I wanted to do now in hindsight, really. But I guess when you leave university, how many know you just have to find a job? Yeah. Because there was a season, if you remember, where I was like, if I don't get a job right now, I'm going to have to go back to Ireland. And I wanted to be in Liverpool. And then obviously we wouldn't have been together. So it was a big sort of desperation to be in Liverpool.
What lessons did you learn from that?
The lesson I learned was, look, you have to talk to people in a career or a life stage that you want to be in further down the line. It almost is sort of similar to having sort of counsel, I guess, having someone speak into your world and almost help you set yourself up to win and set yourself up to win strong as well. Yeah. So like having people that you look and you go, right, that is the career that I want to do, and going to them and going, hey, how did you get there? What things did you do? What course did you study? And then, you know, work your way back and really make a plan. Don't be so passive with everyday decisions, especially early on in that sort of maybe A-level direction, university degree. When you're just starting out at the age of 18, it's a very important age to understand, right, now, I'm going to think hard about this, because this will, you know, not define the rest of your life, but it will definitely create stepping stones. And you can divert at different points.
I think it's really wise to find out, like, okay, in your life, what will fulfill you more? Like, it's okay if you want to have a well-paid job. That's okay to desire for that. Like, go for it, like desire the best paid job. Or is it something like, actually in life, money doesn't really ever consume me, or it won't really concern me, but I'm more concerned of helping people. Right. It's like, find the job that's going to do that. Like if it's helping people, you need to make sure you've found the job that will do that. But hey, if it's money, like go and find out how much it earns. Like if you've entered a job that has a max, limit on what you can earn, and you're thinking, well, that's not going to have me that nice lifestyle that I want, then go for something else, reach out.
What about you? What about you?
So for me, I'm going to talk more about maybe not so much my education, but more my university experience.
Okay.
So a bit of my background, when I went to university, I went in Birmingham. So I moved from Essex to Birmingham, and I wasn't a Christian at the time. So I went to university very much just living my own ways. And then I became a Christian at university. But one of the mistakes I did make in the first few years, and you might be able to relate to this whether you're in university or not, this is just a general mistake, that a lot of people will make, is that I was living double lives. I went to university, I then became a Christian. I was then trying to, go to church on Sunday, and I was, going very hungover, or, my life just didn't match up. I was living a double life. And I think here's the input to this. The consequence of that is that you have this constant feeling of being torn and this constant feeling of being guilty.
Yeah.
But the truth is, the Christian faith, God doesn't want us to feel guilty. You don't step into being a Christian to feel guilty.
Yeah.
That's why he went to the cross. That's why he sent Jesus to go to the cross. So you don't have to carry guilt. But when you're constantly living double lives, it naturally, the consequence of that is that you're going to feel guilty. But again, he doesn't want that for you. And you're constantly torn. And another thing that kind of broke my heart at the time was that I was confusing my non-Christian friends. I used to live with non-Christians, and they used to watch my life and see how I would say one thing and say, oh, I'm going to, I'm a Christian now, so I'm going to pursue this.
It's almost like it's not adding up.
And then they see me that way, and they're going, hold on, Megan, I am so confused. What way is it like? And I was overcomplicated the Christian faith, and it is simple, and but there is, ways to live by it. And, it says this, a lesson that I learned is that you can't please both the world and God. And that was what I was doing.
So
I think
good.
when you live double lives, you're trying to please the world. You're trying to please your friends at uni and, what they expect of you. But then you're trying to please God as well. You're like, okay, God, I love you now. And I've got this relationship with you now. And I want to please you, God. So I want to honor what you say in your word. But also I'm trying to please my friends. And it says in James 4:4, it says, you adulterous, don't you realize that friendship with the world makes you an enemy of God? I say it again, if you want to be a friend to the world, you will make yourself an enemy of God. And that just shows it there. You cannot be friends with both. As much as it will sound like that's a great idea, you will feel torn, you will feel guilty. So guys, the lesson in that is just, if you're going to pursue God, pursue him with all your heart, and he'll have grace for your mistakes, but don't just carry on living that double life.
Yeah. And hey, we're going to move on into career next. And this is sort of a category which I think many of you guys will find yourselves in, obviously. But I think a mistake that I made very early on was I jumped around from job to job, and it got hard.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because I would start to build some momentum, and then it will come up against a bit of a roadblock in work where it sort of became difficult, became challenging. And then I just nope, that's it. I'm going to move on. I'm going to, go and find something else. And I did. And then I did the same thing there. And then I did the same thing in the next place, and the same thing in the next place. And it was almost becoming like a sort of a regular habit that I was building into myself without even realizing. And I think the consequence that it created was it sort of damaged my self-worth, because I'd build up, obviously, all this progression in one workplace. It would then get hard. I would give up or give in. I didn't have someone to say, no, keep going, it's fine, just push through this season and just it'll get better. Didn't have that at the time. I wish I did.
Yeah.
But obviously it damaged my self-worth to the point where I was thinking, man, do I just suck at all these different things?
You don't suck, Nick.
I know. But then I did. Then I thought, I was like, wow, I need to find something that I'm good at.
Yeah,
but actually, I was good at those things. But just because I came up against one roadblock, I took the easy option and just moved on to something else.
Yeah.
And really, it was the same issue, but it was transparent in a different way.
Yeah.
So
and you're not alone in that. There's so many young adults who, are in a job, but they find it tough, and then they leave. It is a habit and a common pattern in that age gap.
And I think, look, the lesson that I learned from this was I was never going to grow in my potential. Every single one of you guys listening right now, I've got potential, but you've got to be willing to work towards that potential, that God-given potential he's placed in your life. Don't just give up when it gets hard. Don't just give in when it just gets a little bit nitty gritty. Push through that. It will build character. That's what the Bible talks about. It talks about when you're going through trials, that will build character. When you're going through different experiences, that will develop your character. So I think it's really important to understand that your career is probably one of the most beneficial places to develop, your character through just pushing through the hard times.
Yes.
It will get better. Everyone's going to experience ups and downs in the work experience, in the work life. So don't give in when it gets hard, and see the reward and what it means as well, as you can go from that and help someone else and encourage them.
That's great.
But what about you, Meg? What's your mistake in your career?
One of my mistakes is, and I feel bad saying this because it just doesn't sound good to an employer if they're watching this. But there was a season, I think, for a long time in my job where I was doing the bare minimal. Like I would go in as late as I can, leave as early as I can. I'm a teacher, I'm a PE teacher, but school bell goes and I'm out of here. And I was kind of doing the bare minimal. Like we're sitting in a team meeting, and I'd honestly contribute nothing. I'd sit there.
You sit there like this,
And honestly, that people in the workplace must have thought, "Well, she's not got a lot to give. She's not got a lot of input. She's not very passionate."
Yeah.
And it's mad because I'm a very passionate person, but I wasn't giving my all. And a consequence of that, if you're out there right now and you feel like, yeah, I can relate to that. When I go into work, I just do the bare minimum. Like that's not my passion. That's not where my heart is. So I'm just doing. That's what the consequence will be. Right now, you might not feel like you've got passion and purpose, but the more you feed into that attitude of doing bare minimum, the more you lose passion and you lose purpose in it.
Yeah.
There is purpose and passion in everything you do. You can find passion wherever you are if you just feed it. And I think the same as a purpose. It's like if you take on a responsibility, if there's an opportunity at work for you to take on a responsibility, hey, why are you holding back? Go for it. Like, and I'm speaking to myself still. I've been teaching 4 or 5 years now. Yes, I've been on maternity the last forever, how long, and I'm about to go again. But I think if there's more opportunities given, if I take an opportunity and run with it, I might have more passion about it. I might have more purpose about it. We get emails sent through, who wants to go on a school trip this weekend? And I'm like, not me.
My weekend is my weekend.
My weekend's my weekend. But it's like, but then I'm losing passion. So it's only backfiring on myself.
Yeah.
And hey, a lesson is this, guys. And if you call yourself a Christ follower, this will even impact you more in this. And almost it convicted me. But it says in Colossians 3:23, work willingly at whatever you're doing as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people.
Yeah.
It's so good because we could come to church, and if you serve in church, you can give your all, you can give your ideas, you can give your passions, and then you could be a totally different person in the workplace. And I'm kind of thinking like, what it's saying here, God is saying, well, work willingly, whatever you do, as though you're working for the Lord. You don't just work for the Lord when you're in church. You work for the Lord everywhere you are. You work for the Lord in your workplace. You work for the Lord in your volunteering, anywhere. And I think that just there, that scripture sums up, the lesson is, hey, you need to start, doing more than the bare minimum.
Yeah.
And God will honor that.
Yeah. And I love what you said there, like feed your passion, making sure you're in that right place where you're in that right mindset where you can really go, yeah, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do everything I can to feed that, which is so great. But hey, we're going to move on to finance as our next sort of topic. And we've made so many mistakes with our finances, both before we got married, when we got married as well. And I think one of the biggest mistakes we made at the very start, and when we did start marriage, was we didn't budget. It was probably by year, we've been married now, 5 years? There's a test right there. 5 years, but probably wasn't until year 3 we really took seriously a budget.
Yeah.
And I think the mindset behind that was, no, it's fine. We've got money coming in. It's all good. And then we sort of got ourselves into a bit of a hole, didn't we?
Yeah, for sure.
We sort of dug ourselves into a bit of debt, and we realized if we don't figure this out right now, it's going to become really problematic when we want to come to, buy our first house. We want to come to obviously have a family.
Yeah.
Let's try and sort it out. And we did. We made a budget. But I think, look, the consequence of us, not making a budget was obviously, like I said, we went into debt, but it created a lot of worry early on in our marriage, particularly for you, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like you were quite worried at times, and you were there, and maybe it's a mindset, maybe in your past, or maybe you were trying to overcome, wasn't it?
Yeah. Definitely. Well, let's link in both mistakes then. My mistake was that I had a negative mindset on finance.
Yeah.
And I think that resulted in me on not wanting to create a budget because I was so panicky at looking at our finances because I thought it was going to eat me, or it was going to, what's it going to do to me if I look at what money we've got or what we haven't got. But one thing I did find as a consequence, when you don't budget, it always feels like you have nothing when actually you probably have something.
Definitely.
Like it surprised us when we budgeted. We were actually shocked at how much we could save. We were shocked at how much we could actually spends. So budgeting isn't like it shouldn't like minimize your spending. It should maximize it, but in a good way.
And one of the best things,
constant worry.
One of the best things we did, I remember this, is we got around someone in the life of church who was really good at finance, and they helped us develop a budget. They helped us look at our debt, and they sort of said, actually, guys, this is not as big of a problem as you think it is. We thought, oh my gosh, we got so much debt. And they were like, actually, that's a drop in the ocean to what I've experienced helping other people, because this guy helped many people through debt and overcoming that. And he helped us create a plan, and then we stuck to the plan. We used cash when we could use cash.
Yeah, that stops now. So we used to use cash and envelopes, but society ain't allowing us using cash anymore. So we have moved, and we're going to give a plug to this, and we should get some advertising
like credentials or some sort of
Monzo, oh my gosh, I love it. I create pots every day. Nathan gets apps and he gets a notification.
Like, why is there so many pots?
Because you can save and you can make all these pots, and I absolutely love it. So if you want to talk to me about pots and Monzo, come and speak to me. But that was a great way, a lesson we learned then. Go and get advice, go get someone to sit down, go for it practically, find something practical like a Monzo account or something where you can budget yourself. But lastly, my mistake was that negative mindset. I was so consumed with it, when actually money is just money. Yes, it's important, but actually who you are is way more important than what's in your bank account, how much debt you've got. Like that you're not taking any of that to heaven with you. So I think trust God in his provision, and money just isn't everything. And if you're very caught up in that mindset of just panic and worry, just speak to someone about it, because you can really find, I think, financial freedom in that.
Cool. Awesome.
So next thing is faith. We're like proper changing gears right now. We've gone from education to career to money to faith. But hey, let's go for it. So something in your faith life, Nathan, what have you found that you've made a mistake in?
Definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, the biggest mistake I've made on my faith journey is trying to do it on my own. I've done a preaching this a while ago, but I often find it's a constant thing where you're kind of going back and forth, and you're reminding yourself of what Scripture says, and you're reminding yourself that no, God is the one that carries that weight. But when I got into this mistake of this mindset of just trying to do everything myself on my own, I'd sort of put God to the side and go, no, I'm in a good season right now. But it was probably it was an unconscious pushing God to the side, because everything was good, everything was great. And how many know that when you go through good seasons, they're almost a little bit more dangerous in some respects, because you do push God to the side, you get comfortable, you get complacent, rather than the low seasons where you really draw close to God. But I think for me, that was the mistake. And then the sort of consequence of the mistake was I felt the weight, and this weight, if I'm honest, at the time, it crushed me.
For sure.
At first, it didn't like completely flatten me. It was a slow build over time, but then it got to a point where it just completely crushed me, and it just ruined many aspects of our lives. In the last episode, you shared a little bit about that as well, but I think for me, just reflecting back on that season, it just took the joy out of life, and there was so many things to be joyful about, but not putting, God first and trying to do it my own. It created that environment that was never going to set me up to win. God is the one that provides. He's the one that's always going to give breakthrough. He's the one that's going to bring joy, bring peace. And I just wasn't experiencing that joy and that peace, but it was something I didn't realize.
It came from a good heart. Like you could be listening right now and thinking, especially for guys, I'd say, maybe even, when you have more responsibility, you want to try and conquer it all. Like you want to provide for your family. You want to be that man of God for your wife. You want to be that, great friend. So you're trying to do, and all with the great heart, but actually you're doing it on your own, and that's not what God intended. So what's some takeaway lessons from that?
So the lesson that I learned in really quick summary is I learned to give it to him. I learned to give him everything. And if you're struggling with this, if you're sort of in that place right now, there's 3 things that I just wanted to share that really helped me put some structure behind getting to where I wanted to be, which was closer to God, and which was where I completely relied on him and gave him everything. Right. First thing is you have to identify you have a problem. So many people think that so many minor things aren't a problem. Really, they are. They just brush it under the carpet and move on until then the next problem comes, and then it becomes a bigger issue. And then you do the same, and you build in this habit of just pushing things to the side, saying, oh, that's fine, it's fine, it's fine. I wish we could ban that word fine, because when someone else says they're fine, sometimes they're really not fine. And they're really working through some bigger problems. So that's the first thing. Identify you have a problem. The second thing is ask for help. You've got to have people in your world that you're able to go to and say, hey, do you know what? Right now, this is a hard season. Hey, would you pray for me? Would you walk this with me right now?
Great.
Would you just continually check in on me? That would be really supportive. And as guys, this is probably harder for us to do than maybe for girls. I know my own sort of pride perhaps at times got in the way and prevented me from seeking help. And really, I needed that help. I just needed an ear. I needed a friend, someone to listen, someone to really go, do you know what? What you're facing isn't as big as you think right now.
And I think for the friend out there who maybe is that person checking on someone.
Yeah.
So for me, who was checking on you, it's actually very obvious, guys, when someone is going through this, because the way they word things, their language. So Nathan will start saying something like, I feel the pressure. We're about to have another child. You know, I've got to do this. I've got to sort this. And as soon as you start hearing that word, I've got to do, and that sort of negative connotation to it, you know, they're doing it a lot on their own.
Yeah.
You know, and as soon as they start changing their language to, you know what, we're going through this right now, but God is going to find a way. You know, we don't know what's ahead of us, but, you know, as soon as you bring God in it, you know.
Yeah, and the third thing on that, just to round that off, was keep checking. Like, just because you get through a season and you've done that in the past doesn't mean that you're not going to be falling into that same trap again. And I'm not saying that you're not going to work through that and learn from that. You are. But what I'm saying is you just have to keep checking yourself, keep checking where you're at. It says in 1 Peter 5:7, it says, cast all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. It doesn't say cast some of your anxieties or cast the anxieties that you think are only valid. It says cast all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. And it goes on to say that he'll lift that. So be encouraged, guys. Like, don't try and go at your own. Give to God. He's gonna take over. What about you, Meg? What about your faith?
My mistake was a little, is again putting me out there. I'm sorry, people. Everyone might think of me different after this mistake, but sometimes I say I'm praying for you and I forget. I know. I'm an awful person.
Wow.
I'm an awful Christian.
Mic drop.
But especially in this season when everything's on WhatsApp, like everything, there's so many messages. And this is a great thing. I'm not saying it's great. I love how at Liverpool One Church, we're so surrounded, maybe your life groups, of people who are constantly sending prayer requests. I think we should be sharing our prayer needs with each other.
Yeah.
And I think we should be standing in prayer with each other.
Yeah.
However, a mistake is that sometimes I might say, I'm praying, and I just forget. And here's the consequence, guys, is that you're not being true to your words and you're not genuinely living out your faith. Like, part of your faith life is prayer. And I think as well, like, you might be the only person that person's revealed this request to.
Yeah.
And if you're not petitioning it to God, then no one might be. So it's like you could be the only one sending that prayer, and just because you've forgotten, God is not going to answer or listen to it because you haven't lifted it to him. So I do think, I'm sort of laughing about this, but it is a serious thing. I think actually, if you're going to say you're praying for someone, you should be praying for them. But guys, I have learned from this. I'm not all awful. Don't think I'm never going to Megan ever again with a prayer request because she does not pray. I do. I've learned. I'm getting there. But one thing I do is this, to help me be true to my words. I live a busy lifestyle. I've got, a little one, another little one come in, I've just, been working and things like that. However, I will find time in my week, maybe it's twice a week, where it's like, this is prayer time. Yes, I'm praying constantly every day, but this is prayer time for others. This is prayer time for not my needs right now. This is others. And I look through all my WhatsApps that I've had, all the requests that have been sent on it, and I write them down. Yes, the prayer might be a week late, okay? And it might have already had an outcome, but I'm still, it's better than not praying at all. And the more you can do this, the more better. Say you can do this every evening before you go to bed. Get your journal out, quickly write down any prayer requests sent to you that day. Like, write them out and give God the prayer. So that's one thing I did. And another thing I done in lockdown, actually, because one thing I enjoy doing in person, if someone had say to me, I was having a conversation, they say, I've got a job interview tomorrow, can you pray? I'd actually quite like to say, okay, let's sit down, let's pray right now. Like, let's do this right now and let's hear it, because there's something about hearing a prayer. Like, if someone said to me, I'm praying for you, I'm like, that's fantastic, thank you. But there's nothing that can beat when they sit and you can hear their words of prayer over your life. Like, there's power in that. Like, it's so encouraging. And I think sometimes there's healing in just hearing someone pray for you. So I think one thing I've learned as well, when I can, I will just pray then and there and let them hear that prayer. Lockdown hasn't allowed us to do it as much. So instead, one thing I done this summer was I asked a friend, what can I be praying for? And then I voice record my prayer and send it. I don't listen to it back because it's a bit cringe, but I just send it with the hope that, they're going to hear these words and it's going to encourage them. So that's in that. But hey, let's move on to our last thing, and it's leadership. Now I'm going to jump straight in because I'm on a roll right now with just embarrassing myself and putting myself lower and lower. But no, this is an embarrassing thing, guys. But I think sometimes our mistakes are embarrassing, but we've just got to go there because, hey, we learn from these. When I first started out, maybe leading, we were leading young adults, when we first started getting married, especially in the early days, I thought I knew better than my leaders.
Oh, dangerous.
I know. And I'm very embarrassed to say it because we have the most amazing leaders here at Live for One Church, but guilty. Me being young, me being excited, me being ambitious, thought I knew best, thought my ways were the best ways, thought that if I brought an idea across and it wasn't taken with, I thought, well, they're all wrong. And that was just something I went through. I thought, I thought I knew best. And, it's not great. But I did learn from this. But the consequences of that, if you're in a position now that maybe your boss in work or it's your parents or you're serving in Live for One Church and you've got a leader overseeing you, if you are in that place and you probably think you know best, the consequence is going to be you're going to turn bitter. Like it's going to be quite noticeable on your character. You'll turn quite harsh and cold to that person. You don't grow. Like you're not going to grow in that season because your heart is not in the right place. But also their discernment, if they're put in a place of leadership, they probably have that gift of discernment. Yeah. Their discernment will sniff that out. They will catch you out. They will know if you're sitting there and you're thinking you know better, they're going to sit there knowing that. But yeah, God will not give you more in that. I think, for the season, I just stayed flat. Wasn't progressing. I wasn't moving forward. I just felt like it was getting harder and harder. But the whole time it was my own thing. It was my own mistake I was making that was stopping me from growing. So here's the lesson, guys. In 1 Timothy 5:17, it says this: let the elders who rule well be considered worthy of double honor, especially those who labor in preaching and teaching. Guys, honor your leaders always, whether you think you know best, whether you don't. They probably know best because that's why they're leading you. Honor them always. Honor them even if you don't feel like it. Give them double honor because they're so worthy of it, and it humbles you as well.
So good. No, thanks for sharing that. That's so encouraging, even to hear your mistake and how that worked out and how you learned from that. That's amazing. For me in leadership, one of the biggest mistakes I've made is thinking that I cannot lead when I'm broken or going through a difficult season.
That's great.
I've had a season where I was in that place, in that mindset, and it's almost like you're telling yourself, you have no right now to lead the people that you've been entrusted to lead because of your brokenness.
Wow.
When really that was just the enemy speaking lies into my head.
Yeah.
And it was a big mistake. And thankfully, I had people like you in my world that helped me see that for what it was early on, where it didn't cause major issues. But for me, like thinking about, that mistake and the consequence that really happened was it left me sort of feeling really empty and unusable. Even though, my history had done a lot for these people that I was leading, and obviously I built great friendships. I've seen them go from strength to strength to strength. But actually in that season, I just felt like I had nothing to give when really I did have a lot to give.
For sure.
And really I wasn't unusable. I was very usable to some extent. And I think, look, the lesson that I learned from this is you can lead from a broken position so long as you seek wise counsel continuously.
That's great.
And you have to do that until you're out of that season. And the reason why is because you just don't want to make any sort of big decisions in that season.
For sure.
It's fine to make, small decisions that are, going to have sort of minimal output, if you like.
Almost play it safe.
Yeah, play it safe is definitely what I would say, and what I've learned is because you don't want to make any big changes. But in that season, I think for me, I just realized that actually God uses your brokenness. There's that bit of scripture where it talks about if you faith as small as a mustard seed, you can move mountains. So even in a place of brokenness, a place of complete humility, that's sometimes where God shows up the most.
Yeah.
It's like the end of yourself is the beginning of Him, right?
Great.
So for me, in that place of brokenness, I was able to lead and to be very open with the people around me to where I said, hey, you know what, right now I'm in a difficult season, but I'm still going to choose to lead you, and I'm still going to be here to support you because I believe that it's not me doing the work right here, it's God. And I think that's where you really have to put your faith to the test. In those broken seasons, that's sometimes the seasons where on reflection, I look back and I go, wow, that is where God showed up the most.
Yeah.
That is where God was actually doing the most.
Yeah.
And you can look back on that and you can
And you
see.
don't have to quit. You don't have to back down. You just got to be wise about that season.
Yeah.
And hey, you don't continue to lead in that season. We want to lead full. We want to lead from a place of fullness. But I love the fact that you've switched it and said, actually, you can still lead broken. You just got to be wise about it.
Just be sensible,
So thanks, Nathan, for your vulnerability there and your realness. I'm sure that will help many people out there. But young adults, that's all we've got time for the podcast this week. And hey, we just want to encourage you. Like, these mistakes we've made, they are something you can talk about, because actually it says in scripture, doesn't it? Boast in your weaknesses, because in your weaknesses, Christ is there. God is your strength. So in all our weaknesses, I can sit here and put my hands up and say, hey, I can share all my weaknesses, all my mistakes with you, because actually it doesn't define me. My mistakes don't define me. God is who's defined me. God says who I am, and I'm loved and I'm chosen, I'm forgiven, I'm worthy. So yes, I make mistakes, and we've all done that. And I think so often we hide them. So we want to encourage you, go away today. Maybe in your life groups, you can start maybe opening up more about your mistakes, opening up about your weaknesses. They're not flaws. They're not something to be ashamed of. There's something that actually we can work through, we can talk through, we can boast about how God has taught you through it.
So good.
Because there's so many things to be learned in there.
Yeah. Well, hey guys, time is gone. Thank you so much just for tuning in today, for checking this out. But hey, would you just do us the honor? Maybe there's someone in your world right now who just maybe needs to hear this. Maybe share this with them, encourage them today. We've got other things coming up, other hot topics we cannot wait to get into. So hey guys, until next time, have a great week, whatever you're up to. And hey, we'll be back in touch doing the next episode real soon. I cannot wait. It's going to be brilliant.